What's up YouTube? Welcome back, my name's Tony. Today we're going to talk about a question I hear all the time from new mix engineers. Should I put my EQ before or after my compressor? There's a ton of different things you have to think about before answering this question. The way I've always approached it is like this. You take care of any EQ cuts you need to do before the compressor, and any EQ boosts you need to do after the compressor. Now it's not always that simple, because a lot of times once you throw a compressor on there, start squashing it, that'll bring up other frequencies that you didn't know were a problem. But for the most part, that's how I think about it. I find this topic is easiest to illustrate by looking at the low end of the frequency spectrum. If you have an excessive amount of low end in your sound source, and you throw a compressor directly on that, then that boomy low end is going to be what's triggering your compressor. And because of that, you're going to have to really slam the sound source in order to even it out in the proper way. However, if you throw an EQ on your sound source before the compressor, then you can even out or get rid of some of that low end frequency, so that the compressor can focus on the more important parts of your sound source. With a sound source like an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, or vocal, I generally like to throw an EQ on my plug-in chain first with a high-pass filter and maybe some surgical EQ cuts, maybe some broader scoops to just kind of shape the tone that's going into the compressor. Then your compressor doesn't have to work as hard to keep your sound source even. Now with all that being said, there are a lot of reasons you'd want to boost your EQ going into the compressor. By boosting your EQs into the compressor, you can really manipulate the way that the compressor attacks your source. So let's pull up some audio examples that'll really help illustrate this point. So I've recorded a quick guitar line into my system here. Now let's mess with some EQ and compression and see what happens. So for starters, here's the guitar line just as I recorded it. I used my Les Paul right into the main input of my Motu 828X interface with the Joey Sturgis Tones ToneForge plugin, which I've printed down to the track before adding these EQs and compression to it. So the first plugin I'll pull up is Waves CLA76. I've got that set more aggressively than I normally would on a guitar. It's at a 12:1 ratio, fairly fast attack and release. So as I play this through, you'll notice that it's taking off between 3 and 5 decibels of gain reduction, but when it gets to the palm muted part and that low frequency starts to build up, it gets down to about 7 decibels of gain reduction. So through that palm muted part, what I was noticing is that the palm muting would start and the compressor would really grab that down. But when I went to the open chords between palm muting, it almost made it seem like the palm muting part was louder. But there was still a difference in dynamics between the palm muted part and the non-palm muted part in that section. So I know I could just change the release on the compressor and have it return to normal a little quicker. But let's try a different approach here. So I've got set up here a Renaissance equalizer. And all I've got going on there right now is a high-pass filter around 148 Hz. So let's take a listen to that again. You'll notice through the palm muting section that the compressor doesn't seem like it has to work as hard. And because there's considerably less buildup of the low frequencies, there's not as much of a dynamic gap between the palm muted section and the non-palm muted section. So now we've pulled out a lot of that low end on there. That definitely helps the compressor to work a little bit more evenly across the guitar. But what if we want to add a little bit of that low end back in? Now we could just boost some low end on the same EQ that we have, But let's try boosting one on another EQ after the compressor. So I've got a band set up on this second Renaissance EQ. It's at 126 Hz, we're boosting about 6 decibels, and I'll toggle that on and off throughout this take. So by adding that band after the compressor, we were able to boost a little bit of that low end, bring back a little bit of that deepness, that growl, and it didn't affect the way that the compressor was grabbing hold of that track. So let's try the same thing, but with the equalizer before the compressor. So you can hear how that extra boost there caused the audio signal to go over the threshold of the compressor, and it made the compressor really try and grab that and pull it down even further, causing some like weird level variances through there. So when it comes to boosting frequencies before the compressor, I generally like to boost frequencies in the mids, high mids, to add a little bit of extra bite going into that compressor. So for this example, I'm going to boost a little over 3 decibels at 2.46K. Now this boost is coming before the compressor. So with that example, that boosted up the sound of the pick on the strings a little bit more, which triggered the compressor a little early, causing the attack of the compressor to be mainly focused on that pick sound, giving it just a little bit more attack. Now if we did that same boost on the other side of the compressor, so after the compressor, you can hear that it definitely adds a little bit more bite to the guitar, but it really lacks the attack that the first example had from that mid-range bump really triggering the compressor. So let's look at an example of this on a drum track. I've set up a snare drum loop using one of my own samples, and my first EQ has a high-pass filter at 161 Hz. That's going into a DBX 160 compressor set to about 5 decibels of gain reduction. So here's the sound of that snare drum. Now let's turn on this band here, which is a 4.3 decibel boost at 2.5K. Now this is still before the compressor. Now here's that same 4.5 decibel boost after the compressor. So this is one of the times I really like boosting into a compressor, because you can hear that when you boost it into the compressor, you get that frequency boost that you're looking for, but it's a little tighter, a little more controlled, and it adds a little bit more snap to that drum, which I don't know about you, but it's something that I'm always trying to get a little bit more of. Whereas if you boost it afterwards, you get that frequency boost, but it just sounds a little looser, a little sloppier. It just doesn't quite have the same effect. So you can see there's really no easy answer to the question of should you EQ before or after your compressor. But I hope I've given you enough information to start forming an opinion on it, and better yet, I hope I've given you some ideas to go and start trying yourself. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this one and would like to see more videos like this one, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned for more videos coming really soon. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time.